I'd like to welcome everybody to the World Forum on Spiritual Culture being held in Astana, Kazakhstan. I'm Jose Arguelles, President of the Foundation for the Law of Time and Director of the Galactic Research Institute. I would like to thank the President of Kazakhstan, Mr. Nursultan Nazarbayev, and the Senator Tolgan Muhammadjanov of the Senate of Kazakhstan for being the official sponsors of this very significant forum, and a special warm thanks to the hard work of the co-president of the Noosphere Spiritual Ecological World Assembly, Lyubov Gordina of Russia. Lyubov has worked for many years developing the Noosphere concept and developing the Noosphere Constitution, and I know that ideologically she has been very instrumental in getting this forum to its present state. We know that the situation of the world at this point is very grave and very dangerous and in a state of true crisis. I had been invited to attend this forum. I received an official invitation from Mr. Muhammadjanov, and I had looked forward to it. However, late last spring, I had been traveling in Africa and India, and I know many people are familiar with the situation there, but at the point in time in which I was traveling there, I was very struck by the intense poverty, intense disease, intense levels of the absolutely intolerable living conditions, the lack of sanitation in particular, which we know will only breed more disease. I thought and reflected very deeply about these things. I thought about how much money is spent every day on guns and war and preparation for war and fighting war. I thought of all the billionaires in the world. I thought of how much money all of these billionaires had altogether and how much of that it might take to alleviate the poverty. I wondered, why can't we just get rid of that poverty like that? Why can't we just say, this is what we have to do? This is where we have to go. Where is the solution? I thought of how long this has been going on, and I thought this has been going on too long. I knew that this poverty would not go away, the injustice, the oppression. I knew it would not go away overnight, and I knew that the only way that this was going to come to an end was by a complete change of the world order. As long as the world order continues as it is, it will resist to change. It will continue to be a planetary oligarchy, and it will continue to resist the truth of global warming, the truth of social inequality, the truth of out of control social chaos, the truth of out of control degradation of our entire biosphere. Thinking about this and seeing the accelerating level of the world catastrophes, the earthquakes in Haiti and Tibet, among others, the current floods in Pakistan, China, the major oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, the volcano in Iceland, and the effects that these were having on the world, the effects on the displacement of people, the effects on the destruction of the infrastructure of whole societies like Haiti and Pakistan. When I thought about these things, I realized that there would, as I said, that the only way this is going to change is by a change in the entire world order. I saw that it was very, very serious, and I thought deeply about this, and I knew, I went inside of myself, and I knew that the only way I could respond to this, the only way I could take responsibility, was to go within. I had a deep voice from within that told me that as of July 26th of this year, that I should cease my travels and give no more public presentations or talks until after December 21st, 2012. I knew I was supposed to go into seclusion in a remote place and spend my time in the cultivation of higher states of mind. I know the world will change. It is inevitable, and it will happen much sooner than later. The world will change because the noosphere is inevitable. I saw that my responsibility was to continue to cultivate higher states of mind that approximate the consciousness of the noosphere. I also saw that it was my responsibility to cultivate states of mind and consciousness that would elevate my sense of telepathy so that there would be a possibility of communication at a telepathic level with emissaries and members of the cosmic civilization of the universe, which we know is ever present and is watching us and sending us many signals. I saw that this was my deepest responsibility, and that through this process that I was to develop a series of meditations and synchronized telepathic visualizations that could be spread around the world to anticipate the noosphere. When we talk about the noosphere, we know that we are talking about a future condition of the evolution of the planet Earth and of the evolution of the human species, the evolved organic intellectual matter of planet Earth. We know that we are in a time referred to as the biosphere-noosphere transition. This had been foreseen, of course, by the great scientist Vladimir Vernadsky, and also by his associate in France, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who both coined the word noosphere in 1926. We know, of course, that in coining this word, they were looking for a new term to express the impact of human thought on the environment, of human thought in the biosphere. They saw that the condition of the biosphere is being dramatically impacted and affected by the direct consequence of human thought. Human thought in the form of industrialization in particular. This impact, Vladimir Vernadsky, of course, foresaw as creating a type of crisis, a condition which he sometimes referred to as biogeochemical combustion. The world we live in today is in the midst of this biogeochemical combustion. The enormous heat that affected Russia in the area of Moscow this past summer, often 40 degrees above normal, the heat, the smog, the fires, this is all due to the biogeochemical combustion. The biogeochemical combustion is the quickening of the effect of human thought upon the biosphere. It is creating a major, unprecedented crisis. This crisis is a necessary moment to precede the coming into a new condition of being, a new state of being. Just as when water comes to a boiling point and ceases to be water and becomes steam, so at this point, the biosphere, under the condition of biogeochemical combustion is going from one state, heating up, and entering into a new state, and this new state we refer to as the noosphere. The noosphere is to the biosphere as steam is to water. These are two different states or conditions. It is important that we have gatherings like this forum, the World Forum on Spiritual Culture, to begin to focus a larger attention, an attention that goes beyond nationalistic politics, that goes beyond corporate interests, that goes beyond the banking and monetary interests that dominate the world, that goes beyond the ideological conflict that besets our world. We need to have a noospheric lens to look at what is happening in the world today. We need to look through this noospheric lens and see the world as one whole entity, one whole being. This world is a unity, it is an indivisible unity, it is a complex whole system. This whole system is indivisible. It consists of layers, a lithosphere, a hydrosphere, an atmosphere, a biosphere, and the final layer, the noosphere, going from the most dense, the lithosphere, to the less dense, the hydrosphere, the atmosphere, the biosphere, which is very diverse, and then finally the least dense of all, the etheric sphere of the noosphere. We are now at the point where we can say the noosphere is imminent. I would go so far as to say that the famous prophetic date of the Mayan calendar, December 21st, 2012, that this day is the moment of transition when the water boils and becomes steam. This is the moment of the transition when we enter into a new condition, into a new state, the biosphere. Excuse me, the noosphere. Then in this new state, what is important and what will be paramount are mental, spiritual values. That again is why this forum is so important in focusing a world forum on spiritual culture. The noosphere is a radical departure from the previous age. We're going from an age of materialism to an age of spirituality. We're operating by a higher dialectic, a dialectic of self-transcendence. When an organism enters into a critical state of irreducible complexity and crisis, then the only way that it can evolve is through a transcendent leap into a new state of synthesis and simplicity. This is the noosphere. When I spoke earlier of my need to go into an inner space, a space of contemplation, of meditation, of cultivation of telepathic awareness, of telepathic attunement to the whole of the cosmic order. I spoke in this way because we are in a point where some of us must anticipate what is the new consciousness of the noosphere. When we speak of the noosphere, we can speak of it in two ways. One of these ways has to do with social organization. We will, of course, see a radical reorganization of human society based on the reality of the human being as a single planetary organism. This will be a boundaryless society. This will be a new order in which the problems of inequality, the problems of oppression, the problems that we experience today will be eliminated. They will be seen as intolerable. We will have an instinctively compassionate reflex which rejects these kinds of possibilities for the human condition, rejects them, the possibilities of the suffering of our fellow brothers and sisters for whatever reason. So there will be a new social organization. Vernadsky in his thinking, look forward to that. Sometimes followers of Vernadsky refer to this as the organization of the planet of reason, that the human society would finally be organized on pure scientific, rational, reasonable basis. That we would see that the only way for us to evolve is to go to the higher logic, to find that if we actually begin to operate at this level of higher logic, we will actually be happier, we will solve our problems more quickly, we will organize our society in such a way that it conforms to what we might call the dictates of higher reason. This is the mental aspect of the noosphere. There is also the spiritual aspect of the noosphere. The mental aspect of the noosphere shades in to the spiritual. With the organization of our society into conditions where the terms of our everyday life are determined by principles of logic and reason that are in accord with the nature of the biosphere of which we are a part. That is the basis of it, that our logic is based on our scientific comprehension of the nature of the biosphere and how it operates. Right now we are in a total disregard of that. No matter how many signs we see, we disregard the logic of the biosphere. We continue to burn the forests, we continue to plunder the oil, and so forth. When we arrive at a position of a higher logic, the logic of the earth, the logic of the biosphere, when we see that the earth is a unity and it demands that we develop a logic of unity to reorganize ourselves and our society as a planetary whole, then we also develop the spiritual insight. Spiritual insight is the perception of the truth that we are being guided by a higher spiritual force, that there is a supreme creator behind the whole universal process, that the evolution has a purpose which goes from lower states to higher states, that in the grandest, most simple terms, that the evolution has gone from the evolution of inorganic matter to the evolution of organic matter, which we call life, to the evolution of mind, and from mind to the evolution of the supermind. Great spiritual thinkers like Sri Aurobindo in India, who lived between 1874 and 1949, roughly a contemporary of Vladimir Vernadsky. Sri Aurobindo foresaw that we are going from states from mental organization that is constricted by our individualistic ego to states of mental organization that are more holistic and in conformity with the totality of the planet, and that we're going from a state of mental organization to supermental organization, to the anticipation of supermind. This supermind manifests on the earth as the noosphere. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin spoke of the noosphere, that there are planets with noosphere, is how he referred to it. Planets with noosphere. That means that throughout the universe, throughout the great cosmic whole, that there are, as we know, innumerable galaxies, innumerable star systems, innumerable planets, and that in those planets where the evolution has gone from the inorganic to the organic matter, to the mentalization or to the intellectualization of matter, to the spiritualization of matter, that when we go to that level of the spiritualization of matter, that planet is a planet with noosphere. Our planet is on the verge of becoming one of these planets scattered throughout the universe that is a planet with noosphere. The spiritual condition of the higher cosmic mind is one in which there has been a complete development of the psychic faculties, of the what we call the paranormal faculties, of the faculties of the higher mind, where perhaps some of our great mystics in the past were able to have communion with God, communion with the divine nature, realization of the Godhead, that these beings, these mystics, these saints, sometimes referred to as these God-mad people, they were able to break through the boundary of the ego, the boundary of the individual self, and attain to that higher condition. We're talking, when we talk about the noosphere, of the potentiality of every last human being, every last earth citizen attaining that particular state where we have that communion with the divine nature. This is the higher spiritual level of the noosphere. When we are at a conference like this, the World Forum of Spiritual Culture, it is important that we have a comprehensive view of who we are, what we are doing on this earth at this moment. What is this noosphere? This is a graphic that is available on our websites, www.noosphereforum.org, as well as www.lawoftime.org, and it may be downloaded so that you may study it. This graphic is entitled "The Place of the Noosphere in Cosmic Evolution." It is an elucidation of the hypothesis of the biosphere-noosphere transition with special reference to planetary whole system design engineering principles. This is based on a thought of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who visualized the idea of the noosphere as developing very much in the shape of the globe of our Earth, beginning at one pole and ending at another pole. The beginning of the noosphere on the Earth here is what we call at the pole of psychic generation, when the organic matter attains the capacity of psychic reflex. This is the pole of psychic generation. When we talk about the noosphere, then we're talking about the process of the development of the psyche, of the human psyche and all of its powers, the psychic powers. Which is, the human psyche is the psyche of the evolvement of life on this earth to a stage where it has a sophisticated nervous system, as the human does, which can capacitate and receive and transmit all sorts of levels of different information that exist throughout the universe in different mental layers, and which our brain is the capacitor to receive these layers, and then we reformulate that and create the different responses that we create. Once we have the psychic generation, the capacity of the psychic reflex in the organic matter, then we have the evolvement of what we call the human being through the different stages of the human being. And once we get to a certain stage in the Pliocene era, then we have the beginning of what Teilhard de Chardin refers to as the radiation of man, that the human species begins to go out all over the planet. The human species is virtually one of the few species, if not the only, who can adapt to any temperature, any climate situation on the planet. The human being was meant to be a planetary organism. Up till this point, we have not attained full consciousness of that fact. We have not attained the consciousness of what it means to be a single planetary organism, a single thinking, freely thinking planetary organism, with whose responsibility is to maintain and channel the higher consciousness of the planet. The radiation of man, we have the emergence 26,000 years ago of the Homo sapiens, of which type we are. This is the stage of the Holocene era. And as Teilhard de Chardin says, the sapiens, the Homo sapiens group, brought not only fire, but art. These are the two characteristics, that man knows how to tame the fire, and the human being also knows how to create art, elaborate, various forms, diverse forms of art. So with the Homo sapiens, we have fully the emergence of living intellectual matter on Earth. Some 5,000 years ago, a little over 5,000 years ago, the Homo sapiens went collectively across the planet into a new quickening of the evolution of his consciousness. This represents this point in the Mayan calendar, which dates to 3113 BC, 3113 BC. This was the point in time where we see the emergence of the organized, expanding socialization, the organization into cities, into what we call civilization, very rapidly beginning in Sumeria and Egypt at the same time, around 3100 BC, also in India, and soon thereafter in China. We see this organized, expanding socialization. This begins the cycle, what is commemorated in the Mayan calendar as a cycle of 13 baktuns. 13 baktuns. One baktun is 144,000 days, a little over 394 solar years. 13 of these baktuns, 1,872,000 days, 5,125 solar years, from 3113 to 2012. During this period, between the first baktun and the end of the 12th baktun, we have the spreading of civilization throughout the world: Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, Mongolia, Tibet, Mesopotamia, Greece, Persia, Mesoamerica, South America, even into Polynesia. Not to mention the civilizations of ancient Africa. That happened in the 12 baktuns, 1,728,000 days, between 3113 BC and 1618 after Christ, 1618 AD. At that point, another quickening occurred. Already in the 100 years or so before 1618, the European conquest of the world occurred. And this set the stage then for the final Votan, the 13th Votan cycle from 1618 to 2012. 394 years. And during that time, if we could see our Earth in a time capsule as it moved, during that time, that last 144,000 days, we would see such a rapid acceleration of activity, of the impact of human thought on the biosphere, that obviously something was going to happen. This was all just a build-up. We have the scientific revolution, followed by the industrial revolution, and once the industrial revolution is in place, we have the beginning of the population explosion, the human population bomb. This explosion began in 1750, a little over 250 years ago, 260 years ago. And in that time, the population of the human race has increased by more than 14 times over, from 500 million people in 1750 to close to 7 billion people today. And the closer we get to the present moment, the greater the process of acceleration. This process of acceleration is due to one principal factor: the mechanization of time. The mechanization of time was set in place at the very beginning of the 13th Votan cycle, the time of the rise of West European world dominance and the rise of scientific materialism. The triumph was based on the mechanization of time. You can go nowhere on this planet to go into any civil office of any kind, any school office, any institutional office, anywhere, and when you go in, you will see a clock. This is the dominant feature. This is the ruler of our time. This is the ruler of our senses, the ruler of our mind. And because of this mechanization of time, the Industrial Revolution could occur. Everything is based on the mechanization of time. The Industrial Revolution, beginning with the coal mining and the beginning of the industrialization of the textile industries and so on in Western Europe, spread rapidly around the world. Soon there were the locomotive trains, and then after the locomotives, the steamships, and after the steamships and the locomotives, at the turn of the 19th to 20th century, the invention of the automobile. The automobile was the single most significant machine that was invented because it privatized the means of transport. It created a possibility of any human being going from one place to another in their own capsule without having their feet touch the earth. This machine, of course, was driven by the petroleum industry. And these two factors have been the most significant factors in reshaping the face of the earth, the face of human society, until the 1970s and the 1980s. At that time, the next most significant machine, and perhaps even more significant, the computer. The computer, while the automobile is the mechanization of our kinetic sensibility, the computer was the mechanization of our mental functions. So a mechanization of time, the mechanization of our kinetic capacity, the mechanization of our mental processes and functions. With the computer, we enter into the final stage. The Industrial Revolution made possible what is called the Technosphere. The Technosphere is the stage in which we are living, and which we have been living for the last 50 more than 50 years. The technosphere is the artificial structure of global civilization that is completely in coordination and in control of the biosphere. In fact, the technosphere as a unity, as the conglomerate projection of the collective impact of human mechanized thought. This technosphere is like its own type of mechanized symbiotic entity, and as a symbiotic entity, it devours and thrives upon the biosphere. All the deforestation goes into the technosphere, all of the oil goes into the technosphere, everything, all the resources taken from the earth go in to feed the technosphere. We, as human beings, are the bees or the ants of the technosphere. We make sure that the technosphere keeps running. But it's the technosphere that is actually the dominant force controlling the biosphere. But this is merely an intermediate phase. We spoke of the biogeochemical combustion. The technosphere is the principal agent that creates and produces the biogeochemical combustion that characterizes the global warming. And the global warming, of course, is a part of the effect of the creation of a consumer culture, the materialism of the final age, that all the resources taken from the earth are to create goods that can be bought for money by people who are essentially wage slaves, who work for that money so they can buy these goods that are produced from raw resources taken from the earth without asking the earth's permission. So this consumer culture with its shopping malls, its freeways that with the automobiles that go to the shopping malls, that is the center, what we refer to as globalization, and which is largely responsible, the whole process largely responsible for creating the global warming. The other side of the globalization, counterpoint to the global warming, is the creation of the phenomenon of terrorism. Terrorism exists because the intrinsic process in the triumph of historical materialism, which really occurred with the end of the Cold War, of the historic capitalist consumerism and materialism became absolutely dominant in 1990, 1991, that with it, of course, we've already been seeing for a number of years the rise of anarchy and anarchists, sometimes violent. You know, in Russia, Kropotkin and Bakunin were some of the early anarchist thinkers who declared statements such as property is theft. But in the latter part of this cycle, we have the rise of a whole new form, and that's called terrorism. And the terrorism exists simply because of injustice, because of oppression, because of an unwillingness to comprehend or understand different religions or different ideologies. The dominant civilizational force already anticipates a clash of world civilizations, meaning that whatever will not be in accord with the principles of the free market economics that produce globalization must be curbed or eliminated. This creates terrorism. So we have all these processes coming to this point where we are at the stage of approaching the biosphere-noosphere transition. The biosphere-noosphere transition began roughly some 20 years ago when we entered into the phase of the computer and of the cybersphere, the artificial intelligence that characterizes the very last stage of the technosphere. The cybersphere, the internet, the social networking, the mobile phones, Twitter, and everything else constitutes the virtual noosphere. We can have instantaneous tweets and Twitters with anyone, anywhere on Earth. And that constitutes the capacity, that's a virtual telepathic capacity. Telepathy does not rely on the internet, does not rely on an electromagnetic grid. Telepathy is a pure mental thought way of going from one higher self to another higher self. It's the higher self that produces the telepathy. We evolve the higher self through our mind to produce that telepathy. So we come at this point where clearly, as I'm making this presentation, we have 848 days until December 21st, 2012. Clearly, the tenor of events has picked up, and clearly we are going to that state where the biosphere and noosphere transition is complete when we get past December 21st, 2012. At that point there, then we start the evolution to the pole of psychic convergence. This first stage of the evolution of the unconscious noosphere is characterized by divergence, greater and greater divergence. Divergence of ego, divergence of nation states, divergence of interests, creating this tremendous conflict state. At the same time, we are unified as one global family. We know that. We have seen ourselves. Our technology at the same time has unified us. We know we are one, whether we like it or not. When we get past the 2012, then we get into the planetary noospheric horizon. We enter into what Vernadsky referred to as the Psychozoic era. The Psychozoic era represents the spiritualization of matter, of mind and matter. It represents the greatest moment in the evolution of the Earth since the emergence of life. The emergence of life occurred 500 million years ago, life from inorganic matter. Now we are going to the emergence of the dominance of mind and spirit from life. Life is the intermediate term between matter and mind. Now the mental aspect of our evolution will become increasingly dominant, and we will experience what is referred to as psychic compression. Everything will be psychically compressed. We will know, everything will be known within each being. Each being will have the psychic compression of the whole within their own system. So we'll be going from what is referred to as the human phase to the superhuman phase. From hominization to superhominization, from mind to supermind. I'd like to mention one other point here, and that is the existence of a mechanism or a means to help us make this transition, which I think is one very important reason why we are gathered here at this World Forum of Spiritual Culture. And that's the Noosphere Constitution, the Noo Constitution, the Constitution for the creation of an ethical, ecological, sane, spiritual world. This Noosphere Constitution, which was put together by Lyubov Gordina and her colleague Mr. Limonad of Russia, is an extremely important document because it looks at the human being at this point as being on the verge of being able to enter into a true noospheric civilization. In the noospheric civilization, we can pass from one bioregion to another freely. Vernadsky spoke of the creation of the noosphere, where the human being as a single planetary organism is freely thinking and has the rights that are accorded to all of life. The rights of all of life are, we can see in the process of the wind or the birds that fly from one place to another without passports. We have lost our human trust. But as we get to the other side of things and we experience a quantum shift in our consciousness, we are going to experience the restoration of that trust. We're going to experience the restoration of a true spiritual understanding of the nature of life. We're going to experience the quality of everything being sacred. Everything is sacred. You don't just take and plunder. You consider what it is, and you consider its role and place in the whole of the biospheric, noospheric, evolutionary scheme of things. And you consider that and see that is sacred. God put that there. There's everything has a place. We are all part of one large universal pattern. And this universal pattern is now reaching what we might call its apocalyptic judgment day moment. And when that, we are all placed at that condition right now. Everything that is occurring in the world is churning up so that the mistakes and the errors and the incapacities, the ineffectiveness of the human institutions are being very, very, very clearly shown. This is a judgment day process. The human institutions that exist are not based on a God-centered reality. They are not based, for the most part, on a sense of the divine order of reality. The Noosphere Constitution recognizes the inherently spiritual nature of our mind, of our life, of our consciousness. It recognizes that at this point it is important to create concrete steps that address all the issues of how we make this transition. How do we go from maximum divergence to a beginning of the great convergence to the other end of the noospheric spectrum, the pole of psychic convergence. So the Noosphere Constitution is a mechanism and a means to make this transition. It is my sincere hope that everybody here at this World Forum of Spiritual Culture will seriously consider the significance and importance of the Noosphere Constitution in helping us make a totally peaceful and reasonable transition from the present state of world chaos and anarchy to a new harmonic order of noospheric civilization on Earth. I said earlier, the noosphere is based on two aspects or two principles. One, the total social reorganization of human society based on ourselves, the human beings, as a single planetary organism. And two, that we are going into a new consciousness, where we will be leaving the egoic consciousness that has been exacerbated and brought forward by the cybersphere, the consciousness of the individual ego. We are going into a new consciousness, the noosphere consciousness, which is a psychic, higher, super-mental consciousness that has already an intrinsic understanding of ourselves as being a divine reflex, that we are manifestations of the original God nature. We come from an original luminous God source, and in the end we go back to the self-existing luminous God source. The Noosphere Constitution is the means of making this transition and is the means of providing a larger understanding of the process that we are involved in and the importance of going to a new place where we are a unified humanity and a unified cosmic civilization on Earth. Vernadsky, many years ago, stated that the advent of the noosphere is something that statesmen and politicians everywhere should be aware of. Whether our statesmen and politicians can rise to that awareness, I think it's a very positive sign that the President of Kazakhstan and leader of the Senate have helped organize this conference. Perhaps there are some who can actually listen and heed Vernadsky's words. Why did he say that? Because the coming of the noosphere means that the biosphere will be reaching a maximum crisis and everything will be turned upside down, just as everything is being turned upside down at this moment. Russia will not be exporting wheat for the rest of this year because of the global warming experience. Other events will happen between now and December 21st, 2012. I think it's important, and one idea I think that is very important to consider is that with the Noosphere Constitution, among other documents and educational material, that Noosphere study groups be formed in every country. That people can begin to, based on this document, the Noosphere Constitution, that people can begin to discuss and understand in what ways in their local communities they can begin to prepare for the noosphere, how they can make the steps to be ready for the coming of the noosphere. No one can predict the exact nature of this transition, of this great, a momentous moment, the greatest since the advent of life on earth. But it's very important that we all understand and consider, yes, this is actually happening. Just as the events in our world today are actually happening. We have in our power the capacity to at least change our attitudes, to change and shift our ways, so that we are oriented to the fact that the world as we know it, the old order, may be malfunctioning altogether by the end of 2012. We must consider the possibility of electromagnetic solar storms that will gravely curtail the electromagnetic grid of the Earth by the middle or end of 2012, thus in effect putting an end to much of civilization as we know it. We must be prepared and ready. We are also, when we talk about the noosphere, we are also talking about entering into a new time. We are living in one time, and we say, once upon a time, that was another time. Well, in 2013 we'll say, once upon a time, and we'll refer to the whole of history. We will be in a new time, and we will be in a time where we have a positive sense of our relationship with ourselves and with the whole. One of the articles of the Noosphere Constitution, Article 13, deals with the need for a new harmonic calendar or timing standard. This timing standard or calendar we've already tested and is available and is known as the 13-moon 28-day calendar. This is a perfect harmonic standard. It is based on a principle of time that is based on harmonic, cosmic, mathematical principles and organizes our life in according to patterns of synchronicity. When we move into the noosphere, the quality of mind is such that synchronicity is an everyday, every moment occurrence, because we will be released from a purely third-dimensional mind into a fourth-dimensional mind as well. And in the fourth dimension, the organization of mental processes and the facts of life is according to synchronicity. The 13-moon, 28-day calendar is a perpetual timing standard that is organized by these fourth-dimensional principles of synchronicity. I just mentioned that because that is one other tool that we can use, begin to use now in making the transition from this moment of biogeochemical combustion, this maximum moment of planetary crisis, into the coming new order of the Noosphere, the mental field of planet Earth, in which we will each be a cell, an organizing neuron of this total mental field of the Earth. What this mental field will be like in some ways is unimaginable from our present perspective. It's very much like the frog at the bottom of the well, thinking the sky is what you can see from the bottom of the well. The frog gets out of the well and sees that it's much larger than he ever imagined and much different. That is another way of looking at the shift in consciousness that we will be experiencing when we pass that point of December 21st, 2012. In making these remarks, I am hoping that there is some elucidation into the present condition that we are in, and also of the great, great significance of this world forum of spiritual culture. I think that there is no greater conference or event occurring at this point, because we are looking at the Noosphere, and the Noosphere as the future of our civilization, the Noosphere as the preservation of the true spiritual culture of the human race, the Noosphere as the field of potentiality where we can begin to establish true communion and communication with the cosmic civilization throughout the universe. The Noosphere is how the human being grows up. Well, I would just like to wish everybody at this forum that you have an extremely enlightening, open, compassionate experience, and that we all understand the importance of our own brother and sisterhood at this time, and that we can unite as a common force to communicate to the world a message of true value and positive meaning and importance. I thank you very much for this opportunity. I thank again the organizers of this event for having the foresight, the vision, the tenacity, and the courage to make it happen. And my heart is with all of you. We are all bound by one common heart, one common blood. We are all one family, and we are all united in the telepathic field of the Noosphere. Thank you very much.